Bear has arrived in the Alps in Europe to show us survival skills here. Each year, 120 million tourists visit, and hundreds go missing. This time, Bear brought minimal gear: a water bottle, a dagger, and a flint for making fire. After choosing a random location, he parachuted successfully. Upon landing, Bear calmed himself and quickly packed up his parachute. He needed to descend quickly to find a village or settlement. Now on a glacier, he faced dangerous crevasses. To navigate, Bear tied knots in a rope at intervals, filled his backpack with snow, and dragged it behind as he walked. He then jumped down, anchoring the rope firmly in the snow, which relieved him. However, climbing back up was challenging due to the lack of leverage. Using a special knot on his safety rope allowed him to apply foot pressure to climb up. Bear decided to head towards a higher ridge for a clearer view of the descent route, only to see a thick layer of clouds indicating an incoming blizzard. With nightfall approaching, he decided to build a shelter. Opting for a wind-sheltered slope, he used his parachute's back pad to quickly dig out a snow cave. He made a platform on the right for sleeping and sat by an ice well to let cold air sink, keeping him warmer. Before sleeping, he put snow in his water bottle and kept it close to melt by morning. After a day without food, Bear spotted a fox hunting a hare. He planned to scare the fox away after it caught the hare and take the prey for himself. However, the fox noticed him and escaped. Continuing his descent without food, Bear came across an ice lake and demonstrated self-rescue techniques for falling into it. Before entering, he lit a fire for safety, but jumped directly into the water. The first priority was to stay calm and breathe normally to avoid inhaling icy water. Unfortunately, he failed to climb out initially due to numbness, but he successfully escaped on his second attempt. Now, he needed to dry off quickly, as wet clothes can increase heat loss by 25 times compared to dry ones. He quickly removed his wet clothes, but the fire had gone out. After relighting the fire, Bear continued his descent. He finally reached the wooded area he had seen from the ridge earlier. Not long after starting, Bear found a forest hit by an avalanche. This gave him a chance to look for food, as small animals were likely buried underneath. Following the scent of decay, Bear indeed found a rotting young antelope. Its meat was inedible, but the maggots on it could still provide some protein. Before leaving, Bear collected some maggots to use as fishing bait. He came to a frozen lake, where he used a stick to make a large hole in the ice. Then he fashioned a fishhook from a metal wire from his parachute harness, baited it with maggots, and used the parachute cord as a fishing line, adding several hooks. A simple fishing rod was completed. Finally, he stuffed some branches into the hole to prevent it from freezing over again. Hours later, Bear checked his trap and caught a trout. Since making a fire was impractical there, he ate it raw. This was his first substantial meal in days. After dinner, Bear found a cave. Although it leaked a bit, it was better than sleeping in a snow cave. The next day, Bear found walking in the snow both painful and slow. He decided to make snowshoes. He bent a branch into an oval and wove it together with parachute cord, adding a few sticks to distribute his weight and prevent sinking into the snow. This made walking much easier. After 4 to 5 hours, Bear's luck finally turned. In the distance, he saw a group of cross-country skiers. This was the relief Bear had been hoping for. Following them would lead him to a village or settlement. Thus, this episode's challenge concluded. In California's Sierra Nevada, a region with majestic mountains stretching 640 kilometers, dense forests, and scorching lowlands, Bear will demonstrate survival with minimal tools. Therefore, he only brought a water bottle, a cup, and a flint. Bear now faced a cliff. Bypassing it could take hours, but he didn't have that much time as storm clouds were gathering. With no cover, the mountaintop exposed him to storms and lightning. So, Bear had to descend quickly. Without ropes or modern climbing gear, he needed to find a gentle slope and maintain friction with his hands and feet against the rocks. Thus, Bear made his way down to the wooded area. Here, he found a stream and decided to follow it downhill, the fastest way to descend. Soon, Bear reached a large river and planned to build a raft to float downstream. He bent vines around driftwood and tied them tightly. It looked shaky, but the knots would tighten in the water. Now, with the raft completed, Bear dragged it into the water to set off. However, the river's current was fast and uncontrollable. Bear could only avoid rocks by kicking his legs. Luckily, drifting in the water was much faster than on land as the sun was setting and temperatures were dropping. Bear wanted to find a place to make a fire, but the swift river made it difficult to disembark. He had to hold tightly to the logs, and after a big wave, Bear lost his raft. The icy water was bone-chilling, and Bear needed to get to shore quickly. It was getting dark quickly. Bear found a rocky ledge to use as shelter, took off his wet clothes, and struck flint with a hard rock to light a campfire. Although the shelter was not ideal, the fire provided warmth. Early the next day, Bear, feeling hungry, brewed a cup of hot tea using pine nuts. His priority for the day was to find food. After extinguishing the fire with sand, he set off. In the high-altitude area, pine leaves could provide some moisture, but it was not enough for Bear. He needed substantial food and continued downhill. Soon, he spotted a group of wild horses. Bear weaved a rope from willow branches and approached a solitary horse, pulling some wild grass to gain its trust. Initially, things went smoothly, and Bear managed to touch the horse's shoulder. Carefully, he tried to loop the willow rope around the horse's neck, but failed. Now, he had to rely on his own feet to get out. Bear found a dead fir tree, perfect for constructing a triangular shelter. Choosing a good location was crucial, and this spot was ideal with its flat terrain and clear view of the sky, helpful for aerial rescue visibility. Bear quickly arranged the wooden planks in a cross pattern, and the shelter was soon ready. Next, he needed to solve dinner. To catch prey, Bear planned to make a weapon. The cedar wood was hard and suitable for a throwing stick. Once its surface was smoothed, it would be fast and deadly in the air. A nearby wooden post served as a practice target until he could hit it accurately. Bear then spotted a rabbit, crawled carefully, and when close enough, he struck decisively, hitting the rabbit. At the camp, he started a fire using cedar bark shavings as tinder and a stick in a wooden groove to create friction. With the fire going, Bear cleaned the rabbit's skin and innards, skewered it on a stick, and roasted it over the fire. The roasted rabbit was delicious. After eating, Bear planned his next move. The weather was clear tonight, allowing a clear view of the North Star. Bear made markings with stones and branches. The next morning, Bear arrived at one of the most dangerous areas in the Sierra Nevada, the Chaparral region. Not only was the environment harsh, but it was also home to various venomous snakes that liked to stay under bushes and dead trees. The afternoon heat left Bear feeling weak. Suddenly, something exciting appeared ahead. It was a huge lake. Thirsty and eager, Bear rushed to the lake, washed his head with the cool water, and noticed a road on the opposite bank. Impatient to go around, Bear took off his pants, tied knots in the legs, filled them with air to use as flotation, and swam across. Upon reaching the other side, his challenge ended. Located within the Arctic Circle, the Alaskan mountain range features extraordinary landscapes with treacherous terrain and dense vegetation. Bear's only supplies were a snowboard, a small knife, a water bottle, and a flint, dropped by the crew on this snowy mountain. He had to rely on himself to find a way out. Skiing here, the greatest threat was avalanches. Using his survival experience, Bear successfully descended at least 1,500 meters. As the altitude decreased, rocks became visible, making further skiing impossible. Bear discarded his snowboard and continued on foot. Below him was a glacier. Following it could lead him out of the mountains. Along a ridge, he reached a north-facing slope covered with snow due to less sunlight. Worse, the weather was turning bad. Trapping him here could be dangerous, and he needed to descend quickly. However, the slope was over 90 meters high and would take hours to climb down. Bear decided to slide down to save time, an adventurous method. Sliding at speeds up to 80 kilometers per hour without an ice axe, Bear used broken branches to slow down, safely reaching the bottom. Looking back, he remarked that it might have been his craziest ski ever. Fortunately, the end of the glacier was not far. After a short walk, Bear reached solid ground. To leave the glacier, he had to descend an 18-meter waterfall. But then, Bear found an ice cave formed by melting water flowing under the ice. The cave was narrow, and the ice above Bear could be over 60 meters thick. A collapse would be fatal. Luckily, Bear was fortunate, and the light ahead was the exit. Leaving the tunnel, he found an open area where he could finally take off his cumbersome ski boots. Now hungry, the forest ahead was a good place to find food and possibly a river. In the forest, Bear found a tree scratched by a bear and found bear fur. The priority was to leave quickly. After crossing some bushes, Bear found a creek. With some luck, following it, could lead to a river. In Alaska's summer, it's almost 24-hour daylight. It was already 10 p.m., and Bear had walked for several hours, so it was time to build a shelter and rest. This type of olive sapling is a good choice. The best way to cut them is by bending them until the fibers are taut and then lightly slicing with a knife. Bear plans to build a hemispherical shelter, first inserting the ends of the saplings into the ground, then interweaving their tops together, and finally covering it with leaves from the gum tree. Surprisingly, the shelter looks quite good. Next, it's time to start a fire. Willow catkin fluff is excellent tinder. Bear successfully starts a fire and, exhausted from the day, falls asleep immediately. He wakes up at 5 a.m. the next morning. The light rain overnight dampens his spirits. Bear decides to continue following the creek he found yesterday. Reaching the valley bottom, he finally sees a river that leads directly to the Alaskan coastline. In the river, Bear finds a dead salmon, indicating fish are swimming upstream here. He decides to make a spear. First, he finds a suitable branch, removes the excess parts, and sharpens the V-shaped fork at one end. Then, it's time to fish. Bear drives them to a shallow area. This fish is quite large. He inserts his fingers into the gills and, unable to wait, starts eating it raw. This is his first decent meal in 2 days. After dinner, Bear feels much more energetic. It's getting late, and he must find a shelter to rest. A cave is a good choice. Bear must rest quickly. In the morning on the seaside rocks, he finds many mussels, which are excellent food. Bear plans to gather more and cook them. Now that he has ingredients, he still needs to start a fire. Old Man's beard growing on the branches is great tinder. When gathering wood, it's best to use the dead wood found on trees, as those on the ground are usually more moist. Without a pot, Bear wraps the mussels in 2 layers of seaweed and steams them for about 10 minutes. The cooked mussels are delicious, and Bear cannot wait to eat them. After eating, Bear plans to use the fire to light a signal for help, creating white smoke. If someone passes nearby, they will discover you. Unable to attract any ships, Bear must continue on. Hours later, Bear discovers several cabins that likely belong to fishermen. Excited, he runs over. Unfortunately, the area is overgrown and the houses are dilapidated. Bear thinks of a solution. The coastal glaciers are popular tourist spots. There might be sightseeing boats there. However, reaching there requires crossing several miles of sea. Luckily, Bear finds an old but intact boat on the shore. Excited, Bear grabs a shovel to use as an oar and sets off along the coastline. Soon, he reaches a bay filled with ice floes, and as he progresses, the ice becomes denser. It's hard to pass through as they are as hard as rocks. After several impacts, the boat starts leaking. Fortunately, the coastline is in sight. Bear decides to swim over. Removing his clothes, he enters the water. When Bear reaches the shore, his heart rate is extremely high. Recovering, Bear just wants to rest here for a while. Just then, he hears the sound of an engine in the distance. It's a boat. Bear frantically waves his arms, hoping to be seen. Luckily, the people on the boat spot him and turn towards him. Bear is rescued. This challenge now comes to an end. This episode, Bear arrives at the African savanna. Here, the beauty of nature is pristine, and the fiercest beasts roam. Bear carries a small knife, a flint, and a water bottle to show us how to survive. About 3,000 species of wildlife live here, making the savanna a dangerous place filled with the stench of animals. When lost in the African savanna, first find a clear landmark. For Bear, the distant mountains are his target. The melting glaciers atop these mountains form streams or rivers, which often lead to villages and people. With the noon sun scorching hot, Bear seeks a cool place to rest along the way, following animal tracks to a cave. Inside, he suspects it might be a rhino or buffalo territory due to their strong territorial instincts. Using acacia trees, Bear builds a fence. The sharp thorns of these plants effectively deter intruders. For added safety, he crafts a spear with his knife for protection. After resting for a few hours, Bear continues his journey, now showing signs of dehydration. With no drinkable water in the area, Bear squeezes water from elephant dung to quench his thirst, likely the worst thing he has ever tasted. To find water, follow animal tracks. These tracks converge like arrows, leading to a fresh water source. With water secured, Bear heads towards the mountain, but there is still a long way to go. When vultures circle overhead, it indicates nearby prey, potentially providing Bear a meal. Reaching the vulture gathering spot, Bear finds a dead zebra, probably killed by lions. Only bones and skin remain, but they are fresh, indicating a good source of protein. Hungry, Bear cuts open the zebra skin with his knife, tearing the fresh meat with his teeth. It tastes surprisingly good. After refueling with protein, Bear moves on. Ahead lies a forest, a better spot for finding water and resting. Choosing a campsite, Bear uses his flint to start a campfire for a good night's sleep. The next day, following the river, Bear stumbles upon a group of hippos. His sudden appearance startles them, but they dare not move, only making warning sounds. Sensing the danger, Bear decides to find another spot to cross the river. Arriving at a shallow spot is the best place to cross the river. After getting past the waterfall, there appeared a rope with a hanging basket on it. This is a method used by locals to transport supplies. It felt very sturdy. Bear climbed up the rope and was met with several wooden huts. This marks the end of this episode. Next, Bear heads to Florida's Great Swamp in the United States, which covers over 10,000 square kilometers. Its landscape has remained almost unchanged for thousands of years and attracts numerous tourists annually, some of whom perish. Bear arrives by helicopter, ready to start his adventure using a rope to descend slowly to the ground. The landing spot is a forested swamp with water up to his thighs, deep enough to hide large alligators. Bear first finds a tree as thick as a thumb and cuts it down with his survival knife. Although not a formidable weapon, it's better than being unarmed. Looking around in such an environment can be disorienting. Bear aims to leave the watery area and reach dry land as soon as possible. After wandering nearby, he finds the tallest tree, hoping to climb to the top to determine the direction of land. Climbing without tools is hard, so he tightens his shoelaces to create enough friction to help him grip the trunk. Using his legs for power and his hands for balance, he takes a brief rest to regain strength and easily reaches the top. Unfortunately, the view is disappointing, showing only cypress and water oak trees, indicating the presence of more swamp and no dry land nearby. Bear decides to head west towards higher ground, believing that finding land is only a matter of time. Using his watch to determine direction is critical. Moreover, traveling through the swamp is dangerous. You never know what lurks beneath the water. While walking, Bear notices a series of bubbles. He watches intently before daring to enter the water to bypass the area. After 2 hours of trekking, he arrives at an open marshy area where several alligators are sunbathing. Bear cautiously avoids crossing directly and finds a leaning cypress along the riverbank. With his thighs gripping the trunk, he pushes his body upward. As the trunk gets thinner, Bear suspends himself in midair and uses his legs to hook onto a tree on the opposite bank, safely returning to the ground. As dusk approaches, Bear needs to construct a shelter raised above the water. He chooses a young American holly with well-developed limbs. Using the vines growing on it as ropes, he ties sticks to create a bed frame and places branches between them to form the bed base. Nearby, he gathers palm leaves, excellent for bedding material, and uses the fluffy, dry fibers on the trunk for kindling. Bear prepares the fire pit with mud and sets up a barrier with fresh branches. He strikes his flint and knife to ignite the tinder. Bear took the opportunity to dry his feet first. Bear slept fitfully until dawn. Before leaving, he needed to collect some water, which was full of impurities. He removed his shirt, shaped it into a bag, and used it to filter out the debris before boiling the water over a fire. While waiting, he attached his water bottle to a stick and left it on the water's surface. After half an hour, the water bottle stopped moving, so he concluded he should continue west. Walking through the swamp consumed a lot of calories. He targeted a dead tree, but finding no larvae, discovered a nest of wood ants instead. He poured the ant eggs into his palm and ate them without hesitation. As the swamp's water level dropped, tree roots became visible. Bear noticed the greenery ahead looked lush, likely pine or oak trees that grow on dry land. There was sawgrass blocking his path, aptly named for its sharp edges, which could easily cut skin. Bear rolled down his sleeves to protect his arms, used a stick to press down the sawgrass, and walked behind it to minimize injury. Next, he encountered a river and, though it's usually best to follow a river downstream, he decided to continue west as planned. While looking for a suitable crossing point, Bear encountered a sunbathing alligator, aware of its territorial nature. He kept a safe distance to avoid it. After an unknown duration along the river, Bear found a narrow section with a clear view. Alligators can stay underwater for up to 45 minutes, so he waited twice that time without seeing any resurface before swimming across. Swimming also required technique. It was best not to bob his head up and down, which could be mistaken by alligators for a bird or turtle. After nearly 2 days of travel, Bear finally reached solid ground. Feeling a great sense of relief, he sat down to rest briefly, then caught a frog in the bushes and ate it raw. Continuing west, he found an animal trail on the ground, often a good sign of nearby food and water. Bear entered a more open forest and found a grapefruit on the ground, with several more on the tree. Besides grapefruits, he also found an orange tree, making it an ideal spot to set up camp. Use this branch as a crossbeam. Gather some palm leaf stems, tie them on both sides to form a V-shaped frame. Cover with fan-shaped leaves as tiles for wind and rain protection. Light a campfire to ward off mosquitoes and wild beasts. Also, dry your clothes. At 7:30 the next morning, Bear went out to find food. He found a painted turtle, and he knew the meat was delicious, rich in vitamins and minerals. He quickly killed it with his knife, took it back to the shelter, and roasted it directly on the fire. Cooking time depends on the size of the turtle. An hour later, the shell was brittle, easy to pry open. Bear cut a piece of meat, tasted it, and found it good. He drizzled orange juice on it, cut a larger piece, and enjoyed the tangy flavor. After eating, he packed up and continued west. No need to worry about crocodile attacks anymore, but many black bears live here. More dangerous are the mud pits. If you fall in, don't struggle. It only makes you sink faster. If you have a backpack or a stick, place them in front to increase the surface area. Pull out your legs one by one. Once back on the surface, crawl until you reach solid ground. After the ordeal, Bear was a mess. He crossed the last forest, saw a barbed wire fence, a drainage ditch, and a road behind it, ending this episode's challenge successfully. This episode, Bear was in El Dorado, a country filled with jungles and mountains, home to the challenging Amazon rainforest. Due to high altitudes, the thin air makes helicopter flight difficult, so Bear chose the riskier paraglide down. Before he could enjoy the view, he landed quickly in waist-deep swamp water. Now, at an altitude of over 3,600 meters, near freezing temperatures, a soaked bear struggled out of the swamp, headed towards the warmer Amazon jungle below. There, rivers mean human settlements and safety zones. He soon entered a cloud forest, where plants are dense. The temperature rose by 20 degrees, and everything was very moist, appearing almost rotten. Navigating through dense jungle, home to mountain lions and snakes, though rarely seen, the most deadly were some plants, like the highly poisonous leaf ear mouse mushroom. Best to keep away from it. After passing through dense bushes, Bear found a narrow riverbed, formed by centuries of water erosion, like a jungle highway. Following the riverbed downstream, he found a fast-flowing river, originating from snow-covered Andes peaks. The water was ice-cold and biting, so he had to be very careful along the slippery banks. In the jungle, knowing the tricks can make finding food easy. This spotted yellow orchid is Bear's favorite flower. It not only staves off hunger, but also boosts blood sugar. He then ate it heartily. After finishing the orchid, he found 2 ferns covered in a thick, sticky sap to deter insects. However, this did not stop Bear. He decisively packed them to take with him. As dusk approached, he needed to find a shelter for the night. There was a cave across the river, ideal for shelter, but the water was too rapid to cross. Suddenly, Bear had an idea. He went to a bamboo area he had spotted earlier, cut 2 bamboo sticks with his knife, and planned to make a ladder to cross the river. The vines, strong yet flexible, were perfect for binding the rungs. After some effort, the ladder was finally ready. Bear dragged it to the riverbank, aimed for the rocks on the opposite side, and let go, only for the ladder to break in half. Frustrated by the wasted effort, Bear dug into a rabbit burrow where he found plenty of licorice. In the damp jungle, finding dry kindling is tough, but this dry grass was perfect for starting a fire to spend the night. However, the humid conditions and rain made the dry grass too wet to ignite. Desperate, Bear stuffed it inside his clothes as an insulating layer to keep as warm as possible, bracing for a sleepless night. By morning, Bear continued his journey, following the river to the Amazon jungle. There he spotted fish in a stream, an opportunity he couldn't miss. He set about making a bow and arrow. A fallen cohewn palm tree provided ideal bow material due to its hardness. First, he split the wood lengthwise, trimmed the excess with a knife, and chiseled notches at both ends for the bowstring. The leaves of the pita palm, containing long fibers, were perfect for the bowstring. He separated the fleshy parts of the leaves, bit one end, and wove them together to enhance their strength and durability. Finally, he tied the bowstring to the bow frame, completing a functional bow. The arrows were made from the same material. Ready with his bow and arrow, Bear slowly entered the water. After several searches and attempts, and failing to catch any for half the day, an annoyed bear found the shallowest part of the stream. He even used the cameraman's camera to check underwater and confirm the presence of fish. Then began the hunting time. Occupying a favorable position, Bear was infallibly accurate. One arrow, one fish, quickly catching enough. Since these fish carried parasites, they had to be cooked thoroughly. Bear considerately made himself a stove. Watching the deliciously roasted piranha wrapped in leaves and bamboo-cooked ferns, Bear first tried the ferns, which tasted a bit like sticky bamboo shoots, then mixed them with the fish meat, creating variety in his meal. The next day, Bear found a wide river and jumped in without hesitation. He believed he could find civilization by following the river. However, the current soon grew stronger, and Bear had to find another way. Building a raft was too laborious, so he chopped down a log and set off downstream. Fortunately, he reached downstream without incident. Upon landing, he noticed smoke from the opposite bank, signaling the end of this episode's challenge. In Australia's vast inland wilderness, temperatures can soar to 54 degrees Celsius. Bear had just parachuted to his destination. Upon landing, he felt the intense heat and saw the endless horizon. To survive here, he first needed to determine his direction, since the only highway was to the northwest, and the rest was undeveloped wilderness. In the southern hemisphere, a watch can be a good directional tool. By aligning 12 o'clock with the sun, the halfway point between the hour hand and 12 o'clock is north, pointing him northwest. Bear immediately set off towards a cliff 46 meters high. Every move had to be safe as the rocks were loose. He made it down without harm. The air was more humid below, and with the scorching sun, even Bear found it hard to bear. To prevent heat stroke, he kept his head cool by turning his shorts into a hat. Although the hat helped a bit, the main issue was water. The little water Bear carried wouldn't last a day, so he resorted to extreme measures. Bear urinated into his water bottle to replenish fluids. After a sniff and a sip, he saved the rest for the road. Traveling in such heat was dangerous, and urine alone wouldn't suffice. He needed to find a water source quickly. Soon, thunder signaled urgency in building a shelter. The cliff provided a good spot, shielding some rain and protecting from flash floods. The deluge was imminent. In the few minutes before the flood, Bear planned to use a tree and the rock wall's protrusions to build a bed off the ground. Sleeping on the ground during a heavy rainstorm was unwise, as it would soon be flooded. Using branches for the frame and vines for ropes, Bear started building the bed. Before he could finish, the ground was already flooded. Until now, Bear had only his urine to drink, so he filled his bottle with fresh water and took the opportunity to bathe. Refreshed, Bear quickly finished the shelter. With the rain stopped and darkness approaching, he needed to start a fire and dry his clothes. Using cotton from a kapok tree as tinder and a flint, Bear successfully started a fire. Now with a shelter and a fire, he was set for a good night. The next morning, Bear found his breakfast, a fig tree with oval, fuzzy leaves. Before the cameraman could react, Bear had already climbed up. The fruits were rich in vitamin C, so he ate several and packed some for the road. Relying solely on these fruits was not enough for survival in the wild. Continuous energy intake was essential. Bear then spotted a cross spider, an edible species. He removed its head and ate it, finding it gooey but a good source of protein. Continuing on, Bear faced a water crisis again, as the rainwater collected the previous night was running low. He needed to find more water. Suddenly, Bear thought he saw something up ahead. Running over, he discovered a stream, which thrilled him. He jumped into the water. Where there's water, there's life. A creature then caught his attention. It was a snake. It looked dangerous, but Bear carefully pulled it out. This was his favorite kind of protein. In Australia, this type of snake is common. In such a humid and hot environment, cooked food spoils quickly, so Bear decided to keep it alive for now. With food and water secured, it was time to find shelter. A protruding rock ledge ahead made a great camping spot. Bear and his pet crossed the river. After climbing the ledge, he built a fire and spent a pleasant night with his pet. The next morning, as the sun rose, the temperature already reached 32 degrees Celsius. Bear decided to take a morning bath. After coming ashore, Bear continued downstream, which made it easier to find civilization. The river widened and rocks became less frequent, easing his journey. However, as the terrain changed, new dangers awaited because he was nearing the sea, territory of both freshwater and saltwater crocodiles, especially the extremely dangerous saltwater crocodile. The shallow pits loved by crocodiles for basking were everywhere. Bear kept walking along the riverbank. The narrow, long-mouthed crocodiles were freshwater crocodiles, common here and most dangerous when startled. It was best to keep a distance from them. As Bear continued downstream, encountering saltwater crocodiles became more likely. It was their breeding season, and they would leave their usual habitats to come upstream. There, Bear saw an adult saltwater crocodile, recognized by its wide, round nose, one of Australia's most dangerous animals with a bite force comparable to a Tyrannosaurus rex. Walking towards the seaside, Bear reached a jungle where he saw other animals. After climbing a hill, he spotted some glowing buildings, marking the end of this episode's challenge. Mexico's Copper Canyon. The peaks are rugged and the canyons meander deep. Due to the wild terrain, it has been uninhabited for centuries. Bear's challenge begins at this mountaintop. The immediate priority is to find a way out. Bear plans to locate the Chihuahua Pacific Railway to his west. High altitudes bring significant temperature changes. The mountaintop is currently 30 degrees Celsius, but it will become very cold at night. He must descend quickly. This is where Bear finds the most viable path down. Although steep, it consists of 3 rock ledges that can serve as buffering points. The most dangerous part of climbing down is the inability to see the path below, as you never know where the next foothold is. Fortunately, Bear's experience helps him successfully reach the first ledge, but further down, the rocks become too steep to climb. Just as Bear worries, he spots another path on his right. To reach it, he must jump across a 2-meter-wide trench. Bear successfully leaps over and finds the path much easier on this side. Continuing on, Bear discovers a cave ahead, a perfect natural shelter with signs of human use. The cave ceiling is covered with soot from fires. In fact, this cave was used by the Raramuri indigenous people, who often traveled through the Copper Canyon. Though they are gone now, Bear finds a piece of leftover wire, which proves helpful. This is a yucca tree. Bear plans to use it to create a fire saw by friction. First, he splits this wood into strips and carves 2 pieces about 30 centimeters long. He places a small bundle of dry grass in between the wood slices, places stones at both ends, and another wood strip on top. He uses a rope made from sodal leaves to tie the ends. The base of the fire saw is now complete. Next, he only needs to rub the fire saw back and forth on the base. Since yucca wood has a low ignition point, Bear quickly ignites the fire. Now with fire, the night becomes much warmer. The next morning, to reach the canyon floor quickly, Bear decides to make a simple compass. He pours some water into a small pit in the rock, then rubs the wire he found yesterday on his hair to magnetize it. He places the wire on a floating leaf in the water. He waits for the leaf to stabilize, giving him a reliable north-south direction. After finding the direction, Bear removes the wire and drinks the water directly. He heads westward down the slope. Soon, he reaches the valley floor, where there is sunshine, water, and beautiful scenery. Bear sits down to rest for a while. Surrounded by rock walls on all sides, Bear can only follow the river. As he prepares to climb over a large rock, he spots a fish sunbathing in a pond ahead. This excites Bear greatly. First, he blocks the downstream flow with stones, then quietly builds a similar dam upstream. With agile steps, Bear slowly approaches, timing his strike perfectly to catch the fish. This freshwater fish can be eaten directly after cleaning and removing the innards. The fish is high in protein. After a full meal, Bear continues on his journey. When you encounter a waterfall like this in the wild, be very careful and try to avoid it, as dangerous rocks hide beneath the water. Bear could have bypassed this area, but to demonstrate the safest techniques, he plans to jump down directly. Bear uses leaves from an agave plant to make a depth gauge. He tears them into strips, grabs the thin ends, and weaves them together alternately. Soon, Bear has a 15-meter-long rope. He ties a rock to the rope and throws it into the water, pulling it about 90 centimeters each time. Once he retrieves the rock, he can calculate the water depth. Finally, Bear estimates the water is 4.5 meters deep, making it safe to jump down, which he then does. However, the water is very cold and turbulent. After climbing out, Bear is soaked. He immediately removes his outer clothing, gathers some firewood, and starts a fire. Drying the clothes takes a few hours, which he uses to build a camp. This time, Bear prepares a smoke blanket for warmth. He just needs to start another fire nearby, then digs a pit the size of his body and lays some branches inside for bedding. The next day, Bear continues towards the Chihuahua Pacific Railway, but the canyon gradually turns north. Now, he must leave the canyon to continue west. This rock crevice may allow him to climb out. The climb requires good balance and leg strength to push upwards. After reaching the top, Bear squeezes through a narrow opening, emerging into a dense pine forest, where he can move much faster. Suddenly, he spots someone on the mountain slope ahead, the Raramuri people. Although he didn't find the railway, seeing people also signifies the end of the challenge. This episode takes Bear to Iceland, a land of massive glaciers and dangerous volcanoes. The unique geography of ice and fire makes survival here extremely harsh. Bear has now reached his target by air, then jumps directly down. Upon landing, he finds himself in a desolate ice plain, with temperatures reaching -23 degrees Celsius. Bear must rub his hands and stamp his feet to regain some body heat. To survive here, heading southwest towards the coastline is the best option, where not only is it warmer, but there might also be a road leading to Reykjavik. However, Bear soon encounters a fierce blizzard, a common occurrence in Iceland. The weather changes very quickly here, often sunny one second and a complete blizzard the next. Encountering such weather on the ice plain can lead to dangerously low body temperatures. Without shelter, one can only survive a few hours. Fortunately, the blizzard stopped soon after it started. At that moment, Bear discovered an ice cave, which seemed like a good shelter. Without hesitation, he slid down into it. However, once at the bottom, he realized it was not a cave, but a naturally formed glacial tunnel. The surface of the tunnel was made of the oldest blue ice, hard as steel yet fragile, as the glacier was constantly moving. This made it risky, as the ice could easily collapse. Thus, it was best to leave quickly. Bear slid down the slope and reached the end of the glacier. Stepping onto solid ground gave him a sense of relief. However, not far ahead, his path was blocked by a river formed from the melting glacier, icy and bone-chilling. As Bear pondered his next move, he noticed steam rising from the opposite hillside, likely a hot spring. Without any hesitation, he jumped into the icy water, thinking of the warm spring waiting across the river. After a strenuous climb to the shore, Bear felt his limbs freezing. He hurried to the hot spring pool for a bath, but the spring was very hot, so he moved downstream where the water was cooler. There, he used stones to build a dam, creating a pool. Once ready, Bear immediately stripped off and lay in the warm water, enjoying the volcanic mud. Warmed up, and with his clothes nearly dry, it was time to continue on his journey. In this geothermal area, many edible plants grew, including reindeer moss, which, although not very nutritious, could stave off hunger. Small animals were fond of it. After filling his stomach, Bear came across a deep ditch where he surprisingly found a dead sheep, preserved longer due to Iceland's cold climate. It was too much meat for him alone, so he selected the best part. Now with food secured, Bear planned to cook it. He reached a boiling hot spring, took off his shoelaces, and used them to tie the meat together before submerging it in the water. A few minutes later, the meat was cooked. One could tell by Bear's expression that it tasted great. After eating his fill, he continued his journey. After a 5-hour trek, Bear found a patch of trees, rare in Iceland's harsh environment. He chose a path frequented by ptarmigans, tied a slipknot with his shoelace, and fastened the other end to a tree. If a ptarmigan passed by, it would be caught by the rope. With some luck, he might have game to eat the next morning. Having set the trap, Bear then built a shelter. He used moss for bedding and stones for walls, covering them with branches and moss. A simple shelter was thus completed. Next, Bear gathered some dry branches and started a fire, ready to spend a comfortable night. The next morning, Bear added some wood to his fire, then went to check the trap he had set the day before. He found that the trap had caught a ptarmigan. Bear brought the bird back to his camp and eagerly roasted it over the fire. After about 15 minutes, the meat was cooked. Bear took a bite. The meat was tough, but it provided him with a lot of energy. After breakfast, Bear continued his journey southwest. Soon, he reached a moss-covered lava field, formed by solidified magma from volcanic eruptions. After crossing the lava field, he came upon a plain where the wind howled, reaching speeds of 120 kilometers per hour. Bear struggled to walk a few steps, then lay down in a depression to shelter from the wind. After resting a while, the wind began to lessen, and Bear got up to continue his journey. Staggering along, he soon spotted a high-voltage power line on the distant horizon. Excited, he ran towards it. Upon getting closer, Bear confirmed that it led to a road to Reykjavik, marking the end of this challenge. This episode, Bear travels to the Scottish Highlands, a region characterized by magnificent mountains and vast wildernesses, mostly unexplored since the Middle Ages, attracting many tourists. However, extreme weather conditions cause fatalities every year. Now, Bear is in a mountain plateau at an altitude above 1,200 meters. He plans to head north as the nearest town is in that direction. A blizzard soon makes it impossible for Bear to discern directions. He uses the frost on the rocks to determine the leeward side, and knows the previous wind was from the west, which helps him find north. The fierce blizzard forces Bear to walk with his head down. As the altitude decreases, he escapes the blizzard and finds a stream formed by melting snow. Following the stream will lead him down the mountain. With darkness approaching, Bear needs to find shelter before nightfall. However, his path is blocked by a 12-meter high cliff, unclimbable without proper gear. Suddenly, Bear smells food and discovers a dead deer. The deer is rotten and inedible, but its hide is useful. With no time to descend before dark, the deer hide provides essential warmth. After 20 minutes, Bear secures a thick deer hide. Now that it is completely dark and impossible to dig out a snow cave, he finds a rock crevice to shield from the cold wind. His next step is to lie in the crevice and cover himself with the deer hide, waiting for tomorrow to come. The next morning, Bear discarded the heavy deer hide and continued along the stream. Soon he faced a huge valley. The side usually covered in thicker snow is north, as it receives the least sun. By walking down the snowbank, he could find the town to the north. At the valley's bottom, he found a muddy swamp. Bear picked up a handful of red sphagnum moss from the ground. By squeezing out the water, he could drink it directly. The Scottish Highlands have over 50 square kilometers of such muddy swamp areas, which are particularly dangerous. Once stuck, it is hard to get out. Bear began to undress, and then boldly stepped forward into the swamp. Now feeling icy cold and overwhelmed by a foul smell, he kept calm and struggled towards the shore by moving his arms. After much effort, he climbed out, wiped off the mud with the moss, dressed, and left. As the altitude decreased, a pine forest blocked his path, but Bear was pleased. The trees not only provided protection, but also potential food. Soon he found a clearing, a territory of rabbits with many small paths between their drinking spots and burrows. Bear untied the rope from his water bottle, tied a slip knot on the end, and attached it to a stake made from a tree branch. He set several simple traps on the paths, avoiding placement too close to the burrow entrances. After setting the traps, Bear entered the forest to find a shelter. A fallen tree was perfect for creating a half-dome shelter. He simply reinforced the frame and covered it with pine branches to complete a comfortable shelter. Early the next morning, Bear eagerly checked the traps and was lucky to find a rabbit caught. He returned to camp, swiftly removed the guts, and selected branches 60 centimeters longer than the rabbit to roast it evenly. An adult rabbit takes about 30 minutes to cook. This first meal here tasted exceptionally good. Even without seasoning, the wild rabbit had a great flavor. After a hearty breakfast, Bear continued his journey and arrived at the Caledonian forest. There, he spotted a building likely used by lumberjacks. To get there, he had to cross a river with a swift current and wide banks impossible to jump across. Unsure of what to do, Bear found a pine tree fallen across both banks. Perhaps he could use it to cross. The wood was sturdy, but moss made it slippery. He could only straddle it and move slowly forward. After reaching the other side, he ran to the building, which now appeared abandoned. Finding nothing useful inside, Bear left and kept heading north. Before long, he noticed the environment change. The trees became sparser and were clearly planted in rows, a sign of a human-made forest, indicating nearby civilization. Navigating through these young pine trees, he avoided the branches that could poke his eyes. Soon, Bear found freshly cut wood with intact ends, indicating his arrival at the civilized world. This challenge was now over.